For centuries, the most dazzling colors and strongest materials of the Middle Ages were locked away as forgotten secrets. This video reveals how science has now resurrected 25 lost art techniques from that era. You will gain a completely new understanding of human ingenuity, one that connects ancient workshops to modern laboratories. How did medieval glassmakers create colors we still cannot perfectly replicate? What forgotten process gave Viking swords their legendary strength? By the end, you will see the past not as a dark age, but as a time of brilliant, empirical innovation. What does it mean for our future when the best ideas are sometimes centuries old? The heart of medieval innovation did not beat in grand libraries or universities, but within the smoky, crowded confines of the artisan's workshop. This was a world governed by guilds, powerful organizations that controlled every aspect of a craft, from the price of materials to the number of apprentices a master could train. Knowledge here was not written in books but lived in the hands, the eyes, and the memory. A master glassblower did not understand the molecular structure of silica, but he knew precisely how much wood ash to add to his molten sand to achieve a stable, workable glass. A master painter did not study the science of light refraction, but she held the secret recipe for grinding lapis lazuli into the most vibrant, celestial blue pigment imaginable. This knowledge was an oral tradition passed down in whispered instructions and demonstrated through years of silent observation. An apprentice learned by doing, by failing, and by the subtle, often unspoken corrections of their teacher. The entire system was built on empirical wisdom, recipes that worked but whose reasons why were often a beautiful mystery. This created an incredible depth of skill, but it also created profound fragility. A master's sudden passing, a guild's collapse, a city besieged by conflict, or the devastation of widespread illness could sever that chain of transmission in an instant. The recipe died with its keeper. Furthermore, medieval Europe was not a globally connected marketplace of ideas. A technique for forging unparalleled steel might be perfected in a Damascus workshop, while a method for staining glass a perfect crimson might be guarded in a Chartres glazier's lodge. These were isolated pockets of genius, islands of expertise in a vast sea of localized economies and difficult travel. A secret from Paris had little chance of ever reaching Florence. So when we speak of lost techniques, we are not speaking of a single, catastrophic library fire. We are speaking of 1,000 small silences, a slow dimming of countless individual lights across a continent, each extinguished by the ordinary tragedies of history. This fragile, human-scaled ecosystem is the true setting for our story. It explains why so much could vanish, and it makes the modern quest to recover these whispers from the past not just a scientific challenge, but a deeply human one. That fragile human chain of knowledge, broken by time, now finds its repair in the language of atoms and energy. The journey of rediscovery begins not with a dusty manuscript, but with the quiet hum of a scanning electron microscope. Scientific archaeology and advanced materials science have become our most precise time machines. They allow researchers to ask questions of the past without ever touching a brush to canvas or a hammer to metal. Consider a masterpiece of stained glass, its reds as deep as wine. For centuries, we could only wonder at its formula. Today, a technique called X-ray fluorescence can be directed at the glass surface. This tool does not sample or scrape. It simply reads the unique elemental signature left behind by the artist's ingredients, identifying traces of copper or gold that created that specific crimson hue. It is a silent conversation across the centuries. Another powerful method is Raman spectroscopy, where X-ray fluorescence identifies elements. This technique reads the molecular fingerprint of a material. It can tell the difference between two red pigments that look identical to our eyes. revealing whether an artist used expensive vermilion or a more common ochre. This forensic approach transforms artifacts from beautiful objects into data-rich narratives. Each scan, each spectral reading, is a clue in a vast puzzle. Researchers are no longer just historians. They are detectives reverse engineering processes that vanished from practice over 500 years ago. They are listening to the whispers of craftsmen through the very substances those craftsmen left behind. This is how science illuminates the shadows of history, not by rewriting the past, but by finally understanding the profound skill that was always there. Those silent conversations with the past have begun to speak volumes, and the first voice to emerge clearly from the shadows belongs to the jewel-toned windows of the great cathedrals. For generations, we have stood beneath them, marveling at how light transforms their blues into something akin to a twilight sky, and their reds into glowing pools of liquid fire. Modern glassmakers, with all their precision furnaces and chemical purity, could never quite capture that same living depth. The secret, it turns out, was not just in the color added to the glass, but in the glass itself. Medieval artisans were, in effect, early nanotechnologists. They were manipulating matter at a scale invisible to the human eye to control the very behavior of light. Scientific analysis revealed that the most stunning reds, like those at Chartres or Canterbury, contain billions of tiny particles of gold and copper, each one smaller than a wavelength of light. These were not accidental impurities, but the deliberate result of a specific, carefully guarded process. The glass, known as pot metal, was made in a wood-fired furnace. The artisan would add metal oxides to the molten silica and then control the fire with an intuitive mastery, heating and cooling the batch in precise cycles they learned through a lifetime of practice. This thermal dance encouraged the metals to precipitate out, not as chunks or flakes, but as uniform nanoparticles suspended throughout the glass matrix. This is a phenomenon modern science calls colloidal chemistry. When light hits these embedded particles, it scatters in a specific way, a process known as plasmonic resonance. The result is a color that seems to emanate from within the material, not just sit on its surface. It is the same principle that gives the ancient Roman Lycurgus cup its mysterious color-shifting properties, a secret the medieval glaziers somehow rediscovered and perfected. By recreating the exact thermal profiles of those ancient furnaces, researchers have finally produced glass with that same legendary glow. This rediscovery is more than a historical curiosity. It allows for truly authentic restoration of priceless windows, ensuring new replacement pieces age and interact with light identically to their 800-year-old neighbors. But perhaps more profoundly, it has inspired new avenues in modern photonics, the science of using light to transmit information. Medieval aesthetic quests, driven by a desire to create heaven on earth, inadvertently pioneered a material science we are only now fully appreciating. Their sacred light was a triumph of nanoscale engineering. That same mastery of material, moving from the ethereal glow of glass to the enduring weight of metal, reveals another resurrected secret. If stained glass sought to capture divine light, the grand bronze sculptures of the Renaissance aimed to embody divine presence itself. Figures like Donatello's majestic David were not merely carved, they were born from fire and molten metal in a feat of engineering that modern foundries had long considered a lost art. The basic idea of lost wax casting is simple in theory. You create a model in wax, encase it in a ceramic mold, melt the wax out, and pour in molten bronze. But to cast a figure over 6 feet tall with elegant, thin walls in a single, flawless pour, that was the guarded mystery of the medieval founder's workshop. For centuries, the how remained locked within the bronzes themselves. Modern science has become the key, using techniques like X-ray fluorescence and scanning electron microscopy. researchers have performed a kind of metallurgical autopsy on these masterpieces. They discovered it was never just about bronze. The magic was in the specific, secret recipe of the alloy itself. Donatello's workshop used a precise cocktail of copper, tin, and lead, a ratio that provided the perfect balance of fluidity when molten and strength when cooled. This custom blend was the first ingredient in the recipe. The second was the mold. We now understand these were not simple, solid blocks of clay. They were complex, engineered systems. Artisans built the mold in multiple interlocking sections, a piece mold strategy that allowed for incredible detail and undercuts, but the true genius was inside the mold. Before pouring the metal, they would fill the cavity with a core made of organic materials like clay and horsehair. This core was not just a placeholder, it was a thermal regulator. As the searing, over 1000 degrees Celsius bronze flowed in, this core absorbed heat in a controlled manner, slowing the cooling of the metal from the inside out. This prevented the sculpture from cooling too quickly, a process that would create immense internal stresses and cause the bronze to tear itself apart with catastrophic cracks. The specific recipe of the mold's clay, refined over generations, also played a crucial role in managing this thermal dance. What appeared to be a single act of pouring was in reality a meticulously choreographed performance of chemistry and physics. The revival of this complete process changes everything. For conservators, it explains why certain ancient repairs were made and informs how to protect these statues from modern environmental damage with true understanding. For contemporary artists, it unlocks a door. They can now work at the same monumental scale and with the same technical ambition as those Renaissance masters, not by copying them, but by truly walking the same creative path. The silent giants of the Piazza finally have someone who can speak their technical language. From the solid permanence of bronze, we turn to the illusion of captured sunlight. The golden backgrounds of Byzantine mosaics do not simply shine, they seem to hold a living, internal fire. In the great churches of Ravenna or the echoing halls of ancient Constantinople, these golden skies have glowed for over a millennium with a warmth that modern, pristine gold leaf cannot hope to match. For centuries, restorers faced a dilemma. Any attempt to repair a damaged section with contemporary materials resulted in a glaring, cold patch that betrayed the original artist's vision. The secret was not in the gold itself, but in what lay beneath it. Advanced imaging techniques finally peeled back the layers of this ancient mystery. Scientists discovered that Byzantine craftsmen were not applying gold directly to the wall. Instead, they followed a meticulous three-step recipe. First, they laid down a base layer of glass paste, often intentionally tinted with a pigment like red ochre. Upon this warm, colored bed, they placed an astonishingly thin sheet of genuine gold leaf. Finally, they sealed this delicate sandwich with a protective topcoat of clear glass. This technique, known as opus musivum, was an act of optical genius. The light does not just bounce off the surface of the gold. It passes through the clear glass, strikes the gold, and then reflects back through the tinted substrate. This interaction bathes the reflected light in a rosy, fiery hue, giving the gold its legendary depth and warmth. It is the difference between seeing a light bulb and seeing sunlight filtered through autumn leaves. The rediscovery of this layered method is a revelation for conservators. It means they can now create repair materials that age and interact with light in perfect harmony with the ancient originals, preserving the emotional impact of these sacred spaces for future generations. But the implications reach beyond restoration. This Byzantine innovation demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of light's behavior that predates modern optics by 1,000 years. It shows that these artists were not just decorators, they were physicists and chemists working in glass and gold, manipulating perception to create an experience of the divine. Their goal was to build heaven on earth, and to do it, they learned to make their gold breathe with a simulated eternal sunset. The shimmering gold of Byzantium represents one kind of light, but the warriors of the north sought a different, colder glow from their most prized possessions. A Viking sword was more than a weapon. It was a statement of identity, wealth, and supernatural belief. The very best bore names like Legbeer and Gram, and their blades displayed a mesmerizing, watery pattern, as if a stormy sea had been frozen into the steel. This was no mere decoration. It was the visible signature of a manufacturing secret so complex that its full practice vanished for centuries: the art of pattern welding. For a long time, modern blacksmiths could only approximate these patterns, creating beautiful imitations that lacked the legendary performance described in the sagas. The swords were said to be flexible enough to bend without breaking, yet hard enough to cleave shield and bone. How could one piece of metal possess such contradictory qualities? The answer lay hidden in the blades themselves, waiting for tools powerful enough to see their atomic structure. Modern metallurgists, using scanning electron microscopes and micro-X-ray analysis, have performed what can only be called an archaeological dissection. They discovered that a pattern-welded blade is not a single piece of steel. It is a composite material, a meticulously engineered laminate. The smith began with several rods of iron, each with a slightly different carbon content. Some were nearly pure, soft iron, while others were higher carbon steel. These rods were heated, twisted together like a baker braiding dough, then hammer forged into a single, solid billet. This billet was then folded, twisted again, and re-welded, sometimes dozens of times. This intense, repetitive process did two critical things. First, it created those iconic swirling patterns by alternating layers of light etching steel and dark etching iron, a map of the internal folds made visible by a final bath in acidic ferric chloride. Second, and more importantly, it distributed carbon unevenly throughout the blade in a controlled, microscopic gradient. The resulting sword had a complex internal architecture. The softer, low-carbon iron regions gave the blade its crucial flexibility, allowing it to absorb the shock of impact without snapping. The harder, high-carbon steel layers, often concentrated at the cutting edge, provided a ruthless sharpness that could be honed to a razor's finish. The smith was essentially creating a natural shock absorber within the metal itself. Science has now reconstructed the exact sequences, the precise forging temperatures, and the specific etching agents. This revival does more than solve a historical puzzle. It provides a masterclass in ancient material science. The Viking smith, working by the light of a forge and the wisdom of experience, pioneered principles of composite engineering and controlled material properties that modern industry uses in everything from layered safety glass to advanced turbine blades. Their goal was to forge a myth into metal, and in doing so, they achieved a harmony of strength and flexibility that remains a benchmark of craftsmanship. But the true power of a master's work lay not just in the form, but in the color that gave it life. The medieval artist's palette was a world of astonishing extremes, a spectrum that stretched from the sacred to the macabre. On one end shone ultramarine, a blue of such profound depth and vibrancy it was reserved for the robes of the Virgin Mary and valued more highly than pure gold. Its source was lapis lazuli, a gemstone mined from a single remote region in what is now Afghanistan. The process to transform this rough stone into a usable pigment was a months-long ritual of grinding, washing, and meticulous separation, a secret held tightly within the workshops of Venice. At the other extreme existed colors like mummy brown, a rich, transparent shade made from the ground remains of ancient Egyptian individuals, a practice that speaks to a very different, more pragmatic relationship with materials that modern sensibilities find challenging. For centuries, the full recipes for these colors, and more importantly, the precise organic mediums used to bind them to wood or parchment, were complete mysteries. We could see the glorious results, but we had lost the instructions for their creation. This is where chemistry becomes our guide. Through techniques like gas chromatography and mass spectrometry, scientists can take a microscopic sample from a 700-year-old panel painting and break it down into its fundamental components. It is like listening to a finished symphony and identifying every individual instrument that created it. They have decoded the specific protein signatures of the binders. We now know, for instance, that the luminous flesh tones in a Giotto fresco were achieved with a specific egg tempera formula, a precise alchemy of fresh egg yolk, water, and sometimes a drop of vinegar mixed in ratios that varied from workshop to workshop. For the delicate highlights in an illuminated manuscript, the binder was often glare, egg white whipped to a froth, and then allowed to settle into a clear liquid, which dried to a glossy, durable finish. This forensic analysis reveals more than recipes, it reveals philosophy. The choice of binder was not arbitrary. Egg tempera dries quickly and creates a hard, durable surface that resists yellowing over centuries. It forces the artist to work in deliberate, hatched strokes, contributing to that distinctive medieval clarity of form. The rediscovery of these exact formulas is a gift to both conservators and contemporary artists. For those restoring a masterpiece, it means they can create repair paints that will age at the same rate and interact with light in the same way as the original, ensuring the repair remains invisible for generations. For modern painters, it offers a window into a slower, more materially intimate way of working. They can learn that the legendary luminosity of a medieval altarpiece comes not from a trick, but from the built-in light-scattering properties of hand-ground pigments suspended in pure egg yolk. To use these resurrected techniques is to understand that color was never just applied. It was grown from the earth and the workshop, through a painstaking alchemy that turned stone and egg into enduring light. Yet the vibrant colors of an illuminated manuscript would be nothing without the stage upon which they performed. That stage was not paper, but a surface of transformed skin, a material of such durability that it has carried words and images intact for over 1,000 years. We call it parchment, or the finer version, vellum, and its creation was an art form in itself, a slow alchemy that turned a perishable hide into a near-eternal canvas. For decades, modern conservators could only guess at the precise steps that yielded such a perfect, resilient sheet. The answers were locked within the molecular structure of the material itself. Through bioarchaeological study and experimental reconstruction, scientists have now mapped the entire meticulous journey. It began not with a simple cleaning, but with a weeks-long chemical bath in a solution of lime and water. This was not a hasty dip. The skin, usually from a calf, sheep, or goat, would soak for up to a month. This process gently loosened the hair and broke down residual fats without attacking the crucial collagen fibers that gave the skin its inherent strength. After this patient waiting, the true physical work began. The skin was stretched taut on a wooden frame called a hearse. Then, using a distinctive, crescent moon-shaped blade called a lunellum, the craftsman began the delicate work of scraping. This was the critical moment. With a practiced hand, they removed every trace of flesh and hair from one side, then flipped the skin and repeated the process on the other. The goal was not to thin the skin to transparency, but to uniformly reduce it while keeping the dense, interwoven network of collagen completely intact. This collagen matrix is the secret to parchment's longevity. Finally, the surface was finished by rubbing it with pumice stone to create a smooth, velvety texture, and often dusted with fine chalk to provide a bright, slightly toothy surface that would hold ink and pigment without bleeding. Recreating this exact process has yielded profound insights. We now understand that each of these steps served a dual purpose. The lime bath did more than clean, it chemically stabilized the collagen against biological decay. The precise scraping under tension aligned the fibers, creating a sheet that resisted warping with changes in humidity. The chalk layer provided an alkaline buffer, protecting the parchment from the acidic degradation that plagues modern wood pulp paper. This resurrected knowledge is a cornerstone of modern conservation. It allows experts to diagnose past repairs, understand why certain manuscripts have survived so well, and create compatible materials for stabilizing fragile pages. But the implications reach into our own future. In an age concerned with digital fragility and the short lifespan of contemporary paper, the medieval parchment maker's craft offers a powerful lesson in permanence. Modern artisans and material scientists are looking to these ancient techniques to develop new, ultra-durable substrates for important legal documents, artistic works, and records meant to last for centuries. The goal is no longer to make a page from a calf's skin, but to instill that same principle of designed resilience into the materials of tomorrow. The humble parchment, it turns out, was not just a surface for writing history, it was a material engineered to become history itself. While parchment provided the durable canvas, the desire to adorn sacred objects with a more permanent, jewel-like brilliance led to one of the Middle Ages' most dazzling technical triumphs. The art of medieval enameling transformed metal surfaces into fields of luminous color, capturing the light of stained glass within the precious confines of a reliquary or a royal brooch. Two primary methods reigned supreme. Champlevé involved carving depressions directly into a thick copper or bronze base, then filling these troughs with colored glass paste. Cloisonné was even more intricate, constructing tiny cells by soldering fine gold or silver wires onto a metal background, creating a delicate, web-like wall to hold each separate hue. For centuries, the secrets of their radiant, unfading colors and perfect glass-to-metal bonds were locked away. Modern conservation science, using tools like electron microprobe analysis, has finally decoded the enamelist's recipe book. The brilliance was not in the glass alone, but in the flux, a carefully formulated mix of minerals added to lower the melting point of the silica. Analysis of masterpieces from Limoges and the Rhine Valley revealed these fluxes contained precise ratios of potash, lead oxide, and sometimes boron, each workshop guarding its own signature blend. The process was a precarious thermal dance. The artisan would apply the damp, powdered glass paste into its metal cells, then fire the piece in a kiln. Too little heat, and the enamel would remain granular and dull, failing to fuse to the metal. Too much, and the colors would run together like a ruined watercolor or bubble away entirely. Science has shown that the most coveted reds, a color notoriously difficult to achieve, required a master's control over the very atmosphere inside the furnace. By introducing organic material like charcoal chips into the kiln, the craftsman created a reducing environment, a condition low in oxygen. This chemical environment encouraged the formation of those same microscopic copper particles we saw in stained glass, scattering light to produce a deep, ruby-red glow within the enamel matrix. The revival of this complete, end-to-end process from flux formula to firing atmosphere is transformative. For museums, it means conservators can now create repair enamels that are chemically and visually identical to the originals, seamlessly mending cracks in 800-year-old treasures. For contemporary artists, it is a revelation. It reconnects them to a lineage of material wisdom that was severed, allowing modern jewelers and metalworkers to explore these historic palettes and techniques not through guesswork, but with the confident understanding of a medieval master. The glowing reliquaries were not just containers of faith, they were monuments to a chemical precision that made glass and metal sing in permanent, perfect harmony. The silent stone giants of the Gothic cathedral hold a secret not of sight but of sound. Step inside on a quiet day, and a whisper can travel the length of a football field with startling clarity. Yet during a packed medieval mass, the rumble of the crowd would seem to be absorbed. allowing the clear, single line of Gregorian chant to rise unimpeded toward the heavens. This was no happy accident of architecture. It was acoustic engineering of the highest order, a lost art of sculpting with sound waves that modern science is only now fully hearing. Through a field called archaeoacoustics, researchers use three-dimensional laser scanning to create perfect digital models of spaces like Notre Dame or Chartres. They then feed these models into sophisticated sound simulation software, allowing them to map exactly how sound behaves within the stone labyrinth. What they discovered was a series of brilliant, intentional design choices. The soaring ribbed vaults were not just for visual grandeur, they acted as massive, curved sound reflectors. Their specific geometry was calculated to catch the sound of a choir singing from the crossing and project it down the nave, focusing the musical energy toward the congregation. Even the forest of columns played a role. Their strategic placement broke up and diffused the low-frequency rumble of a moving crowd, preventing it from becoming a muddy echo, while allowing the higher frequencies of the human voice to pass through and reflect cleanly off the vaults above. Perhaps most remarkably, the very stone itself was part of the instrument. The specific limestone quarried for these cathedrals has a subtle porosity, a microscopic texture that absorbs just enough of the harshest sound frequencies to take the edge off, creating a warmer, more resonant acoustic environment. Together, these elements formed a giant, natural soundboard. The medieval builders possessed an empirical, hands-on mastery of wave physics, refined over generations of trial and observation. They learned by listening in half-built shells of stone, adjusting curves and angles based on the sound that returned to them. The revival of these principles is actively reshaping modern architecture. Acoustic engineers now study these ancient spaces to inform the design of contemporary concert halls, lecture theaters, and yes, new sacred spaces, seeking that same perfect balance of clarity and resonance. The goal is to move beyond the sterile, electronically amplified sound of many modern buildings and recapture an acoustic authenticity that makes music feel alive and speech feel intimate. The Gothic master builders, in their quest to create a vessel for the divine voice, accidentally authored a textbook on environmental acoustics that we are still learning to read. Their stones do not just stand, they sing, and we are finally beginning to understand the melody. That same quest for permanence extended from the surface of the page to the very marks written upon it. The deep, sharp black lines that recorded everything from royal decrees to Leonardo da Vinci's visionary sketches were not simply ink. They were a controlled chemical reaction, a medieval formula designed to outlast time itself. This was iron gall ink, and its recipe reads like an alchemist's shopping list. It required oak galls, the strange, apple-like growths formed on oak trees when a wasp lays its eggs. These galls were rich in tannic acid. This was mixed with green vitriol or iron sulfate, a mineral often found in the runoff from mines. To this potent blend, the scribe added gum arabic, a sticky sap from the acacia tree, as a binder, and finally water. When first mixed, the ink flowed onto the parchment a pale, grayish blue. But within moments, a quiet miracle occurred. The tannins from the galls reacted with the iron salts in a process of oxidation, polymerizing on the surface of the page. The ink darkened before the writer's eyes into an intense, indelible black, chemically bonding to the collagen of the parchment. It was as if the words were being etched into the skin of the page with invisible fire. This ink was phenomenally durable, resistant to water and light in a way no simple carbon ink could match. Yet this same strength contained a hidden danger. If the recipe was even slightly imbalanced with too much iron sulfate, the ink would continue its acidic reaction for centuries, slowly eating through the very parchment it was meant to adorn. This heartbreaking phenomenon, known as ink corrosion, has left countless historical documents with letters that look like they were cut out with a laser, or pages so brittle they crumble at a touch. Modern chemistry has become the scribe's savior. Through painstaking analysis using techniques like pH mapping and spectroscopy, scientists have reverse-engineered the perfect medieval recipe. They discovered the precise golden ratio of tannins to iron that creates a stable polymer network without leaving behind excess acid. This resurrected knowledge is a cornerstone of modern conservation. It allows experts to mix a historically accurate ink that is chemically benign for use in stabilizing and in filling losses on priceless manuscripts, ensuring the text survives for another millennium. For calligraphers and artists, it offers more than a recipe. It offers an understanding. To dip a pen into true iron gall ink is to participate in that same alchemical transformation, to watch your marks commit themselves to the page with a permanence that feels earned. It connects the modern hand directly to the patient, chemical wisdom of the medieval scriptorium, where every word was written not just with intent, but with a profound faith in the future. But the art of true permanence reached its zenith not on parchment or metal, but on the very walls of the churches themselves. The frescoes of masters like Giotto possess a startling immediacy, their figures seeming to step out from the plaster with a clarity that has survived floods, fires, and the passage of 700 years. Their secret was a race against time, a partnership between the artist's hand and a chemical process unfolding in the wall behind the brushstroke. This was the art of buon fresco, true fresco, and its full mastery was a forgotten recipe. Modern science, by analyzing microscopic samples of the plaster itself, has uncovered the precise alchemy that made these paintings eternal. The foundation was not simple plaster, but a specific lime putty, slaked with water and then aged in pits for years, sometimes for decades. This aging process allowed the lime to mature into an exceptionally fine, smooth, and reactive paste. To this base, the medieval artisans added a secret ingredient, pozzolanic materials like finely crushed volcanic ash or even powdered brick. These additives were the genius stroke. When mixed with the lime and applied to the wall, they triggered a secondary, slow-burning chemical reaction known as a pozzolanic set. This reaction created additional, ultra-durable crystalline structures within the mortar, strengthening it from within over a long period. The artist's work was a daily sprint. Each morning, assistants would apply a fresh section of this specially formulated plaster, called the internocco, to the wall, an area just large enough to be painted by sunset. The painter had to work with confident, swift strokes, applying pigments suspended only in water. As the plaster dried over the hours, it began to absorb carbon dioxide from the air in a process called carbonation. The lime slowly transformed back into limestone, and as it did, it crystallized around each particle of pigment, locking the color into the very fabric of the wall. The painting did not sit on the surface, it became the surface. This is why frescoes cannot be moved, and why their colors retain such fresh, chalky brilliance. The rediscovery of these exact material ratios and aging processes is changing everything for conservators. It allows them to create repair plasters that are chemically and physically identical to Giotto's own, ensuring that new fills age at the same rate and bond with the original masterpiece seamlessly. For contemporary muralists, this ancient knowledge is a revelation. It offers a sustainable, profoundly durable alternative to modern acrylics and sprays, a way to create public art that is designed to become a permanent part of a community's architecture. To paint in true fresco today is to participate in that same ancient, patient chemistry, to understand that the most enduring art is not applied, but grown from the wall outward, in a silent partnership between creativity and stone. The stone walls of the fresco may have been permanent, but the medieval home was a world of clay. On the shelves of a peasant's hut or the table of a prosperous merchant, you would find sturdy, glazed pottery in earthy greens and yellows, a touch of durable color in an often monochrome life. This was not the fine porcelain of the East, but a practical, local craft born from the soil itself. For decades, archaeologists could only guess at the exact methods that produced these ubiquitous wares. Their vibrant glazes a testament to a dangerous, forgotten chemistry. Modern materials science has now cracked the ceramic code, revealing a process that balanced beauty with a very real toxic risk. The foundation was always local. Potters used the clay they had, often iron-rich earthenware that fired to a reddish brown. The magic and the peril came from the glaze. Scientific analysis of countless shards shows the formula was deceptively simple. To create a clear, glassy coating, artisans used lead oxide, a powerful flux that melted at a relatively low temperature. To this base, they added metallic oxides. Copper filings or malachite dust produced a rich, translucent green. Iron oxide, readily available as common rust or ochre, yielded warm yellows and browns. The potter's genius, however, lay not just in the recipe but in the fire. Researchers have reconstructed the critical two-step firing process. The first firing, known as the bisque firing, hardened the raw clay form without any glaze. Then the lead-based glaze slurry was applied. The second firing was where the true alchemy happened, and it required an intuitive mastery of the kiln's atmosphere. To achieve a clear, bright green, the potter needed an oxidizing fire, one with plenty of oxygen swirling in the kiln. This environment allowed the copper to fully express its verdant hue. For deeper, more muted tones, they might briefly starve the kiln of oxygen, creating a reducing atmosphere that altered the copper's chemistry. The potter, judging the color of the flames and the smell of the smoke, was effectively conducting a complex chemical reaction in a sealed brick oven. This entire practice was shadowed by danger. Lead oxide is a potent poison, and its dust during preparation or its vapor during firing posed a constant, unseen health threat to the artisan. Even the finished vessel, if used to store acidic foods like wine or vinegar, could leach lead into its contents. The rediscovery of this complete technical process does more than solve a historical puzzle. It allows archaeologists to read pottery fragments like a chemical biography, tracing the movement of materials and artisans across regions by their unique glaze signatures. For contemporary ceramic artists, it provides a profound historical foundation. They can now explore these traditional, iconic colors and textures using modern, safe alternatives to lead, understanding the original intent without the original risk. These humble pots remind us that medieval innovation was not confined to cathedrals. It lived in the smoke of the village kiln, where artisans, through careful trial and profound risk, learned to trap the colors of the earth in a coat of durable, dangerous glass. The same principle of transforming a humble material into something formidable applies to the very clothes on their backs and the armor on their chests. Medieval leather was not the uniform, supple product we know today. It was a spectrum of textures, from the flexible sole of a walking boot to the rigid, molded chest plate of a soldier. Each required a different, highly specialized alchemy, and science has now revived the full range of this forgotten craft. At its foundation lay vegetable tanning, a process of astonishing patience. Artisans would take raw hides and submerge them for months, sometimes for an entire year, in deep pits filled with a stew of water and crushed oak bark. This was not a simple bath. The tannins from the bark, complex organic molecules, slowly migrated into the hide's collagen fibers. They did not just coat the fibers, they bonded with them, creating a tight, cross-linked network that resisted rot, repelled water, and gave the leather its characteristic strength and flexibility. Experimental archaeologists, by recreating these exact pits and monitoring the chemistry over long periods, have mapped the precise sequence. They found the process involved repeated cycles, moving the hides from stronger to weaker tanning solutions, and meticulous hand scraping between soaks to ensure even penetration. The final step was a generous oiling with substances like neat's foot oil, which kept the tanned leather supple for decades of hard use. This resurrected knowledge provides more than historical curiosity. For conservators of ancient manuscripts, which were often bound in tanned leather, it reveals why certain book covers have survived in remarkable condition, and how to create sympathetic repair materials that age gracefully alongside the original. But the medieval artisan did not stop at supple leather. They discovered how to turn it into something as hard as wood, yet lighter than metal. This was the art of cure builli, or boiled leather. The term is a bit misleading. Modern reconstructions show the leather was not simply boiled, as that would make it brittle. Instead, it was carefully heated in water just below the boiling point, or sometimes in beeswax or oil. This gentle heating relaxed the collagen fibers. The craftsman would then quickly remove the pliable sheet and press it into carved wooden molds or shape it by hand over a form, creating intricate ridges and curves. As it cooled and dried, the collagen tightened into a new, rigid configuration, locked in place by the earlier tanning agents. The result was a lightweight, surprisingly resilient armor for pieces like gauntlets, breastplates, and helmets, often worn by soldiers who could not afford full steel plate. The revival of this complete technique changes our understanding of medieval warfare and daily life. It shows that personal protection was often an ingenious exercise in material science, using processed organic matter to create a defensive shell. For historical reenactors, it allows for the creation of gear that is not only visually accurate but functionally authentic, moving and sounding as it would have centuries ago. This leather, whether walking through mud or deflecting a blow, stands as a testament to a world that saw no material as finished until human ingenuity had extracted every possible use from it. That same ingenuity with organic materials extended to the very bones of their homes and halls. The medieval woodworker possessed a palette that went far beyond simple stains. They knew how to coax color directly from the chemistry of the wood itself, creating hues that were not painted on but grown within the grain. This was the lost art of chemical wood dyeing, a practice that transformed common oak into the appearance of weathered silver or humble beech into the deep, luxurious black of ebony. For a long time, these effects were merely admired as the beautiful patina of age. Modern chemistry, however, has decoded them as deliberate, sophisticated techniques. One of the most remarkable was fuming. Artisans would place unfinished oak furniture inside a sealed tent or chamber. Then they would introduce a source of ammonia, most commonly from large vats of aged urine collected from households or stables. This was not a haphazard process. Over days or weeks, the ammonia vapor would react slowly with the tannins naturally present in the oak. The result was not a surface coating, but a permanent chemical change within the wood fibers, producing a uniform, silvery gray color that penetrated deep into the grain. This method gave the wood a dignified, weathered appearance instantly, a look that would otherwise take decades of exposure to achieve. Another common technique, now called ebonizing, used a simple yet powerful reaction. The woodworker would create a solution by soaking iron nails or filings in vinegar for several weeks. This produced iron acetate, a mild acid. When brushed onto woods rich in tannins like oak or cherry, a fascinating reaction occurred. The iron ions bonded with the tannin molecules, forming a stable, insoluble black compound right inside the wood. The depth of black achieved could be controlled by the strength of the solution and the natural tannin content of the wood, allowing for subtle, graduated shading. This was not a paint that hid the wood's character. It was a chemical highlight that made the grain pattern stand out with dramatic clarity. The revival of these recipes by modern artisan woodworkers is driven by more than historical curiosity. It represents a shift back towards sustainable, non-toxic finishing. Unlike many modern stains and paints that sit on the surface and can chip or peel, these chemical dyes become part of the material, aging gracefully and requiring no harmful solvents. To use these methods today is to engage in a direct dialogue with the material, to understand that color can be a conversation between chemistry and nature's own blueprint. The medieval craftsman, seeking beauty and durability with the materials at hand, discovered how to make wood reveal its hidden potential, one thoughtful chemical reaction at a time. Stone walls do not stand by strength alone, they are held together by a quiet chemical conversation. The mortar binding the blocks of a medieval castle or cathedral was not just filler, it was a living, breathing component of the structure. Modern analysis of samples chiseled from ancient walls has revealed a startling truth. The medieval mason's mortar was often more sophisticated and durable than the rigid Portland cement we have used for the past 2 centuries. Their secret was a formulation known as hot lime mortar. This process began with quicklime, stone that had been baked in a kiln until it was highly reactive. Instead of drowning this quicklime in water to make a slurry, the medieval craftsman would add just enough water to cause a violent, steaming reaction, a process called slaking, until it formed a thick, putty-like paste. This paste was then aged, sometimes for months or even years, in a pit. This aging allowed the lime to mature into an exceptionally fine, workable material. But the true genius came in the additives, the plasticizers. Recipes varied from region to region, often incorporating locally available organic materials. Some masons would mix in animal blood, which contains albumin, a protein that acts as a natural air entrainer, creating microscopic bubbles that gave the mortar flexibility. Others used beer, whose sugars helped retard the set, giving workers more time to lay stones perfectly. Egg whites were another common choice, providing a binding quality that increased cohesion. These were not random ingredients, they were empirical solutions to specific problems. The resulting mortar possessed 2 miraculous properties. First, it was breathable. Unlike modern cement, which forms an impermeable seal, hot lime mortar remains slightly porous. This allows moisture trapped within the stonework to evaporate outwards, preventing the destructive cycles of freeze-thaw damage that can shatter stone from within. Second, and perhaps more remarkably, it was self-healing. If a tiny crack formed, moisture and carbon dioxide from the air could penetrate. This would trigger a renewed crystallization of calcium carbonate, essentially growing new limestone to bridge the gap. The wall could literally repair its own minor wounds over time. The rediscovery and revival of these exact recipes is revolutionizing the field of architectural conservation. For decades, well-meaning restorers used hard, non-porous Portland cement to repair ancient buildings. This often trapped moisture behind the repair, leading to accelerated decay of the original stone, a problem known as hard capping. Now, conservators are returning to the hot lime methods, mixing mortars that are chemically and physically compatible with the historic fabric. These flexible, breathable mortars move with the building, accommodate subtle shifts in the foundation, and allow the structure to function as its original designers intended. This is not merely using an old recipe, it is a profound lesson in material humility. It proves that for the careful, sustainable stewardship of our oldest buildings, the best way forward is sometimes to reclaim a forgotten dialogue between chemistry, material, and time. The breathable stonework of a cathedral is one kind of endurance, but the shimmering vision of heaven upon its altarpiece required a different miracle of transformation. To create that vision, artisans performed a feat of physical alchemy, turning a solid nugget of gold into a sheet so impossibly thin it could float on a breath. This was the art of medieval gold beating, a pinnacle of manual skill that modern machines have never truly surpassed. The process began not with pure gold, but with a specific alloy, often mixed with minute amounts of silver or copper to give it just the right balance of malleability and strength. This small ingot, about the size of a coin, was first rolled into a rough ribbon. Then it was sealed inside a protective packet called a cutch. made from hundreds of layers of parchment or the finest vellum. This parchment envelope was not just a wrapper, it was a critical tool cushioning the blow and distributing the force of the hammer evenly. Now the real work began. The gold beater, a figure of immense strength and perfect rhythm, would take up a hammer weighing as much as 15 pounds. Standing before a massive, mirror-smooth anvil of polished steel, they would begin a rhythmic dance of force. Thousands upon thousands of precise, overlapping blows would rain down, each strike carefully calculated to stretch the metal outward in a perfect, ever-widening circle. This was not a process of brute force but of profound control. Every few hundred strikes the packet would be opened. The now paper-thin gold sheet, having grown brittle from the constant hammering, would be carefully annealed, heated gently to relax its internal structure and restore its ductility. It was then repacked in a fresh cut and the hammering would resume. This cycle of beating and heating was repeated over and over across days of labor until that original nugget had been transformed into a sheet of gold leaf perhaps 100,000th of a millimeter thick, thin enough that light passes through it with a greenish glow. The rediscovery of this exact workflow, from alloy recipe to hammer rhythm, reveals why medieval gold leaf possesses an ethereal quality that factory-produced leaf often lacks. Modern industrial methods use powerful rolling mills which can create sheets of impressive thinness, but they tend to produce a leaf with a harder, more metallic sheen. The medieval hand hammering process, with its incremental stretching and periodic annealing, created a leaf with a softer, more diffuse reflectivity and a far more uniform thickness across its entire surface. This explains why the gold backgrounds in a Giotto fresco seem to hold a warm, inner light, while some modern replacements can look flat and harsh. The revival of this technique is not about nostalgia, it is about recapturing a material truth. For conservators of the world's great art, it means being able to create restoration gold leaf that ages and interacts with light in perfect harmony with the original work. For a handful of contemporary artisans keeping the craft alive, it is a humbling reminder of a pre-industrial peak where human skill, patience, and an intimate dialogue with material could achieve a standard of perfection that our technology still regards with awe. A golden leaf is a marvel of surface, but the true strength of the medieval world was woven from strands of humble fiber. The ropes that raised cathedral stones, rigged the sails of exploration, and bound the loads of daily commerce were not simple cords. They were engineered assemblies, each strand a testament to a forgotten mechanical wisdom. Experimental archaeologists have now followed this fibrous thread back to its source, reviving the meticulous craft of medieval rope making. It began not with spinning, but with a patient act of decomposition. Stalks of hemp, flax, or even stinging nettle were submerged in slow-moving water for weeks in a process called retting. This allowed natural bacteria to gently break down the pithy core, freeing the long, tough bast fibers within without damaging them. After drying, the fibers were combed through a bed of sharp iron spikes called a hackle, which removed any remaining short strands and aligned the long ones in parallel. Only then could the spinning begin, using a drop spindle or a simple wheel to draw out and twist these fibers into a continuous, strong yarn. But a single yarn was never the goal. The final act was performed on a rope walk, a long, open shed sometimes hundreds of feet in length. Here, the spinner would walk backwards down the walk, feeding multiple yarns from a creel while an assistant at the far end turned a crank. The genius was in the twist. The individual yarns were first given a tight twist in one direction, say clockwise. Then, 3 or 4 of these pre-twisted yarns were brought together and twisted again, but this time in the opposite direction, counterclockwise. This opposing torque is what gives laid rope its integrity, locking the strands together so that tension on the rope only tightens the internal grip, preventing it from unraveling under load. The specific number of twists per inch, a guarded secret of each rope walk, determined the rope's final character, whether it needed to be stiff for rigging or supple for tying. Finally, for maritime use, the rope would be waterproofed by soaking it in hot tar, a treatment that also helped preserve it from rot. The revival of this complete process offers more than a historical footnote. For restorers of historic ships or buildings, it allows for the creation of rigging and lifting lines that behave exactly like their medieval counterparts, bearing weight and flexing with authentic movement. But the insights reach into our own future. In an era seeking sustainable alternatives to synthetic polymers, the medieval rope maker's deep understanding of plant fiber tensile strength, twist mechanics, and natural preservation is a masterclass in bio-based material engineering. It proves that true durability was once woven from the very landscape itself. The strength of a rope was tested by its pull, but the voice of a community was measured by its ring. Across the medieval landscape, no sound carried farther or spoke more clearly than the resonant call of the church bell. Its tone was not an accident of metal, but the product of a precise and guarded craft, a fusion of metallurgy, sacred geometry, and acoustic intuition. For centuries, the secret of that iconic, mournfully beautiful sound was locked within the silent bells themselves. Modern metallurgy has now listened, and what it heard was a symphony of calculated proportions. Scientific analysis of historic bells, from the great burden of Notre Dame to humble village spires, revealed a remarkably consistent alloy formula, approximately 78% copper to 22% tin. This specific bronze recipe was the first secret. It provided the ideal balance, a material that was strong enough to withstand decades of swinging and striking, yet sonorous enough to vibrate with a complex, lingering voice. The casting itself was a masterpiece of the lost wax method on a monumental scale. A clay core was shaped to the bell's interior profile, then covered in wax sculpted to the exact final thickness. This wax form was encased in a fire-resistant mold. The wax melted out, and the molten bronze poured into the resulting cavity, but the casting was only the birth of the sound. The true art, the tuning, was what followed. We long believed bells were tuned simply by grinding metal from the rim to adjust the fundamental note. Advanced digital sound analysis has revealed a far more sophisticated process. After casting, the master founder would strike the bell and listen not just to its main note, but to the constellation of higher harmonic tones called partials that ring above it. The bell's character, that blend of solemnity and sweetness, depends entirely on the precise relationship of these partials. Using specialized tools, the founder would then carefully shave minute amounts of bronze from specific, mapped points on the bell's interior surface. Shaving here sharpens this partial, shaving there mellows another. This was acoustic surgery performed by ear, a painstaking calibration of the bell's internal geometry to bring its entire harmonic series into a perfect, resonant alignment. The rediscovery of this complete practice, from alloy to final tuning scrape, has reawakened a lost sonic heritage. Modern bell foundries can now move beyond standardized industrial tones and recreate the authentic, emotionally complex voice of the medieval carillon. For communities restoring a historic church, it means a new bell can be cast to ring in perfect, timeless harmony with its centuries-old brothers. This is more than historical replication. It is the recovery of a community's audible soul, a sound that once organized time, marked joy and sorrow, and defined the acoustic horizon of an entire world. The resonant voice of a bell speaks to the ear, but the jeweled windows of the cathedral speak directly to the soul. Those intricate mosaics of colored light, however, are not single sheets, but vast puzzles held together by an unassuming yet critical component, the humble lead came. These are not simple strips of metal, but H-shaped channels carefully cast to cradle each individual piece of glass. For modern restorers, a persistent problem emerged. Machine-made cames often proved too hard or the wrong shape, leading to stress on ancient glass or failed seals. The solution was not to invent something new, but to rediscover the medieval founders' precise recipe for this structural skeleton. Scientific analysis of original cames, using techniques like metallurgical sampling, revealed a specific formula. Medieval artisans used an exceptionally pure, soft lead, free from the hardening impurities common in modern alloys. They cast this lead not in sand, but in carefully carved stone molds, a method that produced a uniquely forgiving yet durable profile. The cross-section was a masterpiece of minimalist design. The vertical web of the H was thick enough to provide structural strength, while the two horizontal flanges were wide and flat. This created a deep channel to securely hold the glass edge, and a broad surface area to be packed with a special linseed oil putty, creating a waterproof seal that could flex subtly with wind and temperature changes for centuries without cracking. The revival of this exact casting technique has transformed conservation. Artisans can now produce cames that are physically and chemically identical to the originals, allowing new lead to bend and age in harmony with 800-year-old glass. This ensures that repairs are truly sympathetic, preventing damage caused by incompatible modern materials. It is a profound lesson in systems thinking. The medieval glazier understood that the brilliance of the window depended as much on the flexible embrace of the lead as on the color of the glass. Every component, no matter how seemingly mundane, was part of a single, perfected organism designed for permanence. The air within a medieval castle or a bustling city street held more than the scent of wood smoke and animals. It carried subtle currents of distilled roses, spiced herbs, and the sharp, clean note of what was called aqua vitae, the water of life. The art of medieval perfume and distillation reveals a world where chemistry was pursued not just for medicine, but for the very essence of beauty and purification. For centuries, the tools and techniques of these early alchemists were shrouded in symbolic manuscripts and fragmented glassware. Modern archaeochemistry has now reassembled the apparatus, allowing us to smell the past with startling clarity. The centerpiece was the alembic still, a vessel of elegant design often crafted from copper or blown glass. Its form was a study in thermal intelligence. The heated mixture of flower petals and water in the cucurbit, or boiling vessel, would release vapor. This vapor would travel up through the swan's neck, a long, gently curving tube that allowed it to cool slowly. It then condensed against the cooled surface of the receiver, where the precious essential oils and floral waters would separate from the condensed steam. The critical secret, lost to industrial speed, was the control of heat. Medieval practitioners understood that a raging fire would scorch the delicate botanicals, producing a bitter, burnt aroma. Instead, they used slow, sustained heat from sand baths or carefully managed charcoal fires. This gentle coaxing allowed the volatile aromatic compounds to escape intact, capturing the true soul of a rose or a sprig of lavender in a bottle. This was not mere hobbyism. It was a serious branch of alchemy, with knowledge flowing along trade routes from the Islamic world, where scholars like Jabir ibn Hayyan refined the equipment, into the monasteries and workshops of Europe. The recovery of these specific thermal profiles and still designs does more than fill a gap in the history of science. It reconnects us to a holistic philosophy of extraction. For modern natural perfumers, it is a revelation. It provides a blueprint for solvent-free techniques that yield fragrances of unparalleled depth and authenticity, scents that feel alive and dimensional rather than flat and synthetic. To breathe in a scent recreated by these ancient methods is to understand that medieval innovation sought to capture not just color or sound, but the very breath of the garden itself, preserving a moment of bloom through the quiet, patient application of heat and condensation. But the most delicate of all medieval treasures were not forged in fire or cast in metal. They were sewn with light. On the velvets of a king's robe or the sacred cloth of a bishop's cope, you might find entire constellations of shimmering white dots, a field of stars captured in thread. This was seed pearl embroidery, a pinnacle of the medieval textile arts known as opus anglicanum, and its full practice was a whisper lost to time. We long admired the effect, but modern needleworkers could not replicate it, for the secret was not merely in the stitching, but in a preparation so minute it defied belief. How do you drill a hole through a pearl smaller than a grain of sand without shattering it? The answer was hidden in the pearls themselves, waiting for a tool powerful enough to see the scars of ancient craft. Using scanning electron microscopes, conservators examined historical vestments thread by thread. The microscopic view revealed the truth. Each perfect, tiny hole was not punched or burned, but drilled with astonishing precision. The medieval artisan used a tool called a bow drill, a simple device where a diamond-tipped needle was mounted on a spindle. By drawing the bow back and forth, they could spin the diamond point at a controlled, steady speed. This was an operation of immense patience and a surgeon's touch, performed under natural light with the aid of perhaps only a magnifying glass. The diamond, the hardest material on earth, was the only thing that could cleanly cut through the delicate nacre of the pearl without causing cracks. But the craft did not end with the drilling. The examination also decoded the specific, resilient silk thread used and the unique stitching patterns that acted as a flexible net. The embroiderer would use a couching stitch, laying a foundation thread on the fabric and then using a finer, almost invisible silk to lash the pearl to this base at multiple points. This distributed the stress, allowing the heavy, beaded fabric to drape and move without concentrating tension on any single, fragile pearl. The revival of this end-to-end process, from drilling to final stitch, is a revelation for textile conservators. It allows them to stabilize priceless garments with historically accurate materials and methods, securing loose pearls with threads that match the original in strength and flexibility. For contemporary embroiderers, it is nothing short of liberation. They can now work with these organic, luminous materials not through frustrating trial and error, but with the confident understanding of a medieval workshop. To recreate this work today is to engage in a meditation on scale and patience, to understand that the greatest opulence was often achieved through the most minute, focused acts of human hands, turning countless fragments of the sea into a single, shimmering field of captured moonlight. That same patient chemistry of extraction was also at work in the humble pots of the pigment maker's shed. A medieval painter's palette would be unthinkable without its most vibrant green, a color that could capture the fresh leaves of spring or the rich drapery of a saint's robe. This was verdigris, and its creation was a slow, deliberate collaboration between metal, acid, and air. For centuries, its exact production was a messy, guarded secret, resulting in a pigment known for its glorious hue, but also for its frustrating tendency to darken to a murky brown over time. Modern chemistry has finally decoded this ancient recipe, transforming it from an artist's gamble into a conservator's tool. The process began not with grinding, but with a carefully orchestrated corrosion. Artisans would take thin sheets of copper and suspend them over a pot of fermenting grape skins or strong vinegar. They then sealed this chamber, often a simple ceramic vessel, and left it for weeks. Inside this miniature, humid world, a quiet transformation occurred. The acetic acid vapors from the fermenting organic matter reacted with the copper metal, and in the presence of oxygen from the trapped air, they began to form delicate, crystalline crusts of basic copper acetate on the plates. This was not a single chemical but a family of related compounds. The precise hue, ranging from a bluish green to a pure, sharp green, depended entirely on the conditions within that sealed pot. Scientists have now mapped the exact recipe. The temperature, the concentration of acid vapor, the humidity, and the duration of exposure all played a critical role in determining which specific acetate crystals grew. A cooler, slower process might yield the bluer variant, while a warmer, more aggressive fuming produced the classic green. After weeks of waiting, the crust was carefully scraped off, washed to remove residual acid, and then ground with a binder into a luminous paint. The rediscovery of these precise environmental controls solves a centuries-old mystery in art history. It explains why verdigris in some paintings has remained startlingly bright for 800 years, while in others it has darkened dramatically. The pigment's tendency to shift is not random, but a direct consequence of its original chemical fingerprint and its interaction with later environmental factors like sulfur in the air. For conservators, this is transformative knowledge. By taking a microscopic sample and analyzing its exact crystalline structure, they can now predict how a particular patch of green will behave over time. More importantly, they can create controlled environments within display cases or use protective coatings that specifically shield the pigment from the compounds that trigger its darkening. What was once an unavoidable flaw in a masterpiece is now a manageable variable. This turns the act of preservation into a dialogue with the artist's original materials, allowing us to stabilize their intended vision not by altering it, but by finally understanding the delicate chemistry they set in motion so long ago. The shimmering threads and delicate pigments of the medieval world depended on a foundation of absolute precision. The intricate carvings on a choir stall, the articulated plates of a suit of armor, the tiny gears of an early clock, none of these would have been possible without tools of supreme sharpness and resilience. This was the hidden craft of medieval tool steel and file making, a metallurgical secret that empowered every other artisan's hand. For a woodcarver, a chisel was not just a blade, it was an extension of their intent, and it had to hold an edge capable of slicing through dense oak without crumbling. The secret to this performance lay not in a single magical ingredient, but in a meticulous multi-stage process of transformation, one that science has now fully mapped. It began in the bloomery furnace, where artisans would smelt iron ore with charcoal. The key was allowing the molten metal to absorb just the right amount of carbon from the burning fuel, creating a piece of high-carbon steel. This material was inherently hard but also brittle and uneven. The next step was where the blacksmith's genius truly shone. They would take this bloom and begin a rhythmic dance of fire and hammer, repeatedly heating, folding, and welding the metal upon itself. This process, reminiscent of the pattern welding used for swords but with a different goal, served to homogenize the carbon. It drove out impurities and distributed the strengthening carbon atoms evenly throughout the steel, creating a uniform, predictable internal structure. This was the foundation of a reliable tool, but the final, critical act was a masterclass in thermal intuition, a process we now call heat treatment. After shaping the file or chisel to its final form, the smith would heat it to a very specific temperature, judged by the color of the glowing metal. A cherry red indicated one state, an orange-yellow another. At precisely the right moment, they would quench the tool by plunging it into a bath of water or sometimes oil. This rapid cooling locked the steel's internal structure into an extremely hard state. However, a tool this hard would be too brittle for use, prone to snapping under pressure. So the smith performed a final, gentle step called tempering. They would reheat the quenched tool to a much lower temperature, perhaps by holding it over hot coals or in a bed of warm ashes, then allow it to cool slowly. This subtle reheating relieved just enough of the internal stress to grant the steel toughness, the ability to flex without breaking while preserving its essential hardness. The revival of this complete sequence explains so much. It reveals how medieval clockmakers could cut the tiny, perfect teeth of brass gears, or how armorers could pierce complex designs for ventilation in a helmet visor. For modern blacksmiths and bladesmiths, this ancient craft is a profound lesson in material dialogue. It demonstrates that the ultimate performance of a tool is not found in a single action, but in the entire journey of its creation, from the uneven bloom to the final, controlled whisper of heat in the tempering fire. The medieval smith understood that to shape the world with precision, you first had to master the hidden landscape within the metal itself. The artist's final vision on the wall was only the last chapter of a much longer story. Before any pigment touched the plaster, the blank surface was a canvas for problem solving, a place where grand ideas were first tested and refined in a hidden layer of preliminary drawing. This lost practice of medieval mural underdrawing was the private blueprint for every public masterpiece, and modern technology has finally learned to read its ghostly traces. Using a non-invasive technique called infrared reflectography, scientists can peer through layers of paint as if they were glass. A specialized camera emits infrared light, which passes through many pigments but is absorbed by the carbon in charcoal or the iron in certain inks. What reflects back is a detailed map of the artist's first thoughts, sketched directly onto the wall. These hidden drawings reveal a world of creative struggle and spontaneous genius. We can see the quick, searching lines of charcoal where a figure's pose was adjusted, the confident arcs of a compass used to map out a halo's perfect circle, or even fine lines incised into the damp plaster with a sharp stylus to guide the placement of a complex architectural background. In the frescoes of artists like Giotto or Masaccio, these underdrawings show a process far from rigid transfer. They capture moments of hesitation and change, a sleeve lengthened here, a head tilted there, proving these compositions were living things that evolved under the artist's own hand. The materials themselves tell a story of workshop hierarchy. A master might sketch the crucial outlines in a permanent iron gall ink, while apprentices filled in less critical areas with erasable charcoal, all working at speed before the plaster dried. This forensic art history does more than satisfy our curiosity. It fundamentally changes conservation. By distinguishing the original artist's underdrawing from later restoration lines or repainting, conservators can make informed decisions about what to preserve and what to gently remove, ensuring the integrity of the initial creative act. To see these hidden sketches is to stand invisibly in the scaffold beside the master, witnessing the moment a divine vision began its transformation into earthly form. It reminds us that every enduring masterpiece is built upon a foundation of human revision, a quiet conversation between an idea and the wall that would make it permanent. The hidden blueprint for a mural and the finished links of a warrior's armor share a common truth. Both were built from countless small, perfect repetitions. A single suit of chainmail, a hauberk, was a monumental undertaking, a fabric of metal comprising up to 20,000 individual rings. For centuries, historians puzzled over the sheer scale of production, wondering how a pre-industrial society could possibly manufacture such a volume of uniform, resilient wire. The answer lies in a quiet revolution of efficiency, the medieval technique of wire drawing, a precursor to mass production hidden within the blacksmith's forge. Through experimental archaeology, we now understand this was not a haphazard pounding of metal, but a precise, multi-stage mechanical process. It began with an iron or steel rod hammered into a rough square profile. This square stock was then tapered at one end to create a point that could be fed through a hardened steel plate called a draw plate. This plate, a small but critical invention, was studded with a series of consecutively smaller, meticulously shaped holes. The smith would grip the pointed end with a sturdy pair of tongs and pull, using the strength of their body or even a capstan to draw the metal through the hole. With each pass through a smaller aperture, the wire grew longer, thinner, and stronger as the metal's grain structure was compressed and aligned. The true secret, however, was in the pauses. After several draws, the metal would become work-hardened and brittle, threatening to snap. The medieval artisan, through learned experience, had a solution: annealing. They would heat the wire to a specific temperature in a charcoal fire, then allow it to cool slowly. This gentle reheating relieved the internal stresses, restoring the metal's ductility and making it ready for the next finer draw. This cycle of draw and anneal was repeated dozens of times until the wire reached its final, perfect diameter for a male ring. But the craft did not end with the wire. Each length was then coiled tightly around a mandrel like a spring and cut along the coil to create a heap of open rings. The final step was closure. For butted mail, the ends of each ring were simply overlapped and hammered flush. For the stronger, more expensive riveted mail, a tiny wedge of metal was inserted where the ends met, and the overlap was hammered and punched to secure a permanent rivet. The rediscovery of this complete workflow, from drawplate geometry to annealing schedule, reveals a medieval world capable of astonishing systematization. It was industrialization in miniature, a process that broke down a colossal task into repeatable, efficient steps, allowing for the outfitting of armies. This was not the work of a lone genius, but of organized workshops where each stage of draw, coil, cut, and rivet could be delegated, creating a flow of production that feels remarkably modern. The hauberk, therefore, is more than armor. It is a testament to a society that had mastered the art of scale, turning the relentless pull of a drawplate into a second skin of interlocked security. Yet the most personal canvas of all was the very cloth that draped the body, a field of color woven from the earth itself. To understand the medieval world's palette, you must look beyond the painter's studio and into the dyer's workshop, a place of simmering vats and pungent, transformative chemistry. The brilliant red of a noblewoman's gown did not come from a simple stain, but from a hidden, symbiotic dance between plant and mineral. This final resurrected secret reveals how color was not merely applied to fabric, but persuaded to live within it through the lost art of organic dyes and mordants. For centuries, the formulas that produced those legendary scarlets from madder root, deep blues from woad leaves, and rare purples from lichen were silent. We could see the fading results in tapestries, but the full, vibrant process was a mystery. Modern science, using a technique called high-performance liquid chromatography, has performed a delicate kind of textile forensics. By analyzing microscopic fragments of centuries-old cloth, researchers can now identify not just the dye plant, but the exact metallic salt, the mordant, used to fix it. This is the key that was missing. A dye from madder root on its own would wash out to a feeble pink, but when the fabric was first treated with a solution of alum, a potassium aluminum sulfate, a miraculous bond was formed. The alum molecules acted as a molecular bridge, one end binding tightly to the cellulose of the wool or linen fiber, the other creating a chemical handhold for the dye molecules. The result was a color that was locked in, resistant to fading from light and washing. The choice of mordant was an art in itself. Alum produced clear, bright reds and yellows. Iron from rust or fermented solutions would sadden the color, creating the deep, somber blacks, grays, and olive greens so common in everyday wear. But the process was even more nuanced. For the legendary woad blue, used by Celtic and Viking cultures long before indigo arrived from the east, the vat required a living fermentation. Historical recipes and modern experiments show that dyers used stale urine as an agent, its ammonia helping to create the reducing environment necessary to dissolve the woad leaves into a usable, colorless liquid. When the fabric was submerged and then pulled out into the air, the oxygen triggered an oxidation reaction, and the blue blossomed before their eyes. The rediscovery of these precise sequences, the exact pH control, temperature, and timing, is a gift to the modern world. It provides natural dyers and sustainable textile artists with a complete, historically accurate palette that is both stunningly vibrant and environmentally gentle. This is not a step backward, but a perfect fusion where ancient organic chemistry meets modern green principles. It proves that the most enduring colors were not conquered from nature, but negotiated through a patient, profound understanding of partnership, turning roots, leaves, and minerals into a second skin of enduring light. These 25 resurrections are far more than a collection of fascinating historical footnotes. Together, they form a powerful argument, a quiet revolution in how we see the centuries we once too easily dismissed as a dark age. This was not a time of stagnation waiting for the light of the Renaissance to arrive. It was an age of brilliant, hands-on innovation, where masters in smoky workshops achieved a level of material sophistication that our own science is only now beginning to fully measure. Each rediscovery chips away at the old, simplistic narrative, replacing it with a picture of a vibrant, experimental, and deeply ingenious culture. This changes everything. It challenges the very idea that human progress is a straight, ever-upward line. Instead, it reveals a story of peaks and valleys, of knowledge gained, astonishingly lost, and then painstakingly recovered centuries later. This cyclical view of ingenuity is perhaps the most important lesson we can take from the medieval workshop into our own future. It humbles our modern assumptions and asks a vital question. What brilliant solutions to our own challenges have we already invented in the past, only to forget in the relentless pursuit of the new? The answers are already emerging. The medieval dyer's use of plant-based colors and non-toxic mordants offers a blueprint for a sustainable textile industry, moving us away from petrochemical dyes. The mason's breathable, self-healing lime mortar presents a model for restoring our ancient buildings and even constructing new ones in harmony with their environment, rather than fighting against it with impermeable, brittle materials. These are not nostalgic recreations. They are sophisticated, time-tested alternatives that speak directly to contemporary needs for resilience and ecological balance. Furthermore, this journey shatters the artificial wall we often build between science and art. What we have witnessed is a profound collaboration. The scanning electron microscope and the mass spectrometer did not diminish the mystery of the stained glass window or the illuminated manuscript. They deepened it by revealing the nanoscale crystals in the glass or the precise protein signature of the egg tempera. Science gave us a new language to appreciate the craftsman's skill. It turned admiration into understanding. This fusion of STEM and the humanities creates a richer, more complete picture of our shared human story, proving that to truly value our cultural heritage, we must sometimes speak the language of atoms and wavelengths. Finally, and perhaps most beautifully, these rediscoveries are not locked in a laboratory or a history book. They are alive in the hands of today's makers. The calligrapher mixing a stable iron gall ink, the blacksmith heat treating a chisel using ancient thermal intuition, the glassblower experimenting with colloidal gold to capture that legendary crimson glow. These individuals are not merely replicating the past. They are engaging in a living dialogue across centuries. They are empowered with a richer, more authentic toolkit, one that connects their creative present to a deep lineage of material wisdom. This ongoing conversation between the hands of the medieval master and the hands of the modern artisan is where history stops being a subject and starts being a source. It enriches our creative present by reminding us that some of the most luminous paths forward were illuminated a very long time ago. This journey through resurrected arts paints a portrait of the past in living color. It reveals a medieval world not of shadowy superstition, but of brilliant, empirical minds who spoke the language of materials with a fluency we are only now relearning. They were chemists without laboratories, physicists without equations, and engineers without blueprints, whose workshops were crucibles of relentless, hands-on experimentation. Their legacy is not a list of crude attempts, but a gallery of perfected techniques, from the nanostructured glass that holds daylight to the molecular bridges that locked color into cloth. Each rediscovery dismantles the old myth of a dark age, replacing it with a luminous truth. Our ancestors were pioneers of their own sophisticated age, working at the very limits of the possible with the tools they possessed. What emerges from this synthesis of past and present is a profound lesson in cyclical ingenuity. Human progress does not travel a straight, ever upward line. It spirals, sometimes forgetting brilliant solutions in the rush toward the new, only to rediscover them centuries later with fresh eyes and better tools. This cyclical view is not a cause for despair, but for hope and humility. It asks us to look at the challenges of our own time, from sustainable manufacturing to durable construction, and wonder what wisdom from past material cultures we have overlooked. The medieval dyer's plant-based pallet, the mason's self-healing mortar, the rope maker's understanding of natural fiber, these are not relics. They are time-tested alternatives that speak directly to our modern needs for ecological balance and resilience. The past, it turns out, can be a surprisingly advanced guide to a better future. Perhaps the most beautiful outcome of this scientific archaeology is the bridge it builds between disciplines. The scanning electron microscope did not diminish the stained glass window, it deepened our awe for it. By decoding the nanoscale crystals or the precise protein signature of a binder, science gave us a new vocabulary to appreciate the artisan's skill. This fusion of STEM and the humanities creates a richer, more complete human story, proving that to truly cherish our cultural heritage, we must sometimes converse in the languages of chemistry, physics, and light. It allows the conservator to become a healer, the historian to become a detective, and the artist to regain a lineage. And now, this conversation continues in your hands. Whether you are a maker experimenting with natural dyes, a reader marveling at the craftsmanship in a museum, or simply someone who sees the world with a little more curiosity, you are part of this ongoing story. Each of these 25 techniques is an invitation to look closer, to appreciate the depth of thought in the objects that surround us, both ancient and new. If this exploration of hidden genius has sparked a new perspective for you, we would be honored to have you join us for more journeys where science illuminates the shadows of history. Let us know in the comments which resurrected art amazed you the most, the swords that bent like rivers, the gold that floated on breath, or the bells that were tuned by ear. Your curiosity is what keeps these ancient whispers